Welcome in to another episode of Home Field Advantage. Hope you're all having a great week or weekend, however, and wherever you are listening to this podcast across our great country or our great land. My name is Will Highland. I am recording and releasing this podcast for February 1st, 2025, a momentous day that I've been looking forward to actually for a few weeks now. And this is a special bonus pod. We're in between the conference championship and the Super Bowl, but this day marks 10 years since the Patriots beat the Seattle Seahawks in Super Bowl 49. It was an incredible Super Bowl, one of the best I've ever experienced as a fan, and one of my favorite games in NFL history. I'm obviously, for those of you who have, been with me from the beginning, a massive Patriots fan, and I excuse if you're watching on YouTube and I had to adjust my hat, but it was getting a little tight. Anyway, this is the 10-year anniversary of that game. New England beat Seattle 28-24 in the Super Bowl to capture their fourth Lombardi trophy, but their first in 10 years. Tom Brady matched up against the Legion of Boom, that, of course, being Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, that incredible Seattle defense, Pete Carroll as a head coach, Dan Quinn, I believe it was Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm gonna have to check on that, but we're gonna bring up some stuff in this game, and we're gonna talk about it because I think this game is the most important game in Patriots history. Personally, I think it's the best of all of their Super Bowl wins, even better than the 28-3 comeback versus the Falcons, even better than the first Super Bowl overtaking the Rams. Personally, I think this is the best win of their six wins. And it's mostly because what was at stake. And we're going to get to that. We're going to focus on this today. It's the title of the episode, it's the 10-year anniversary of this game. And I want to provide this to my listeners, many of which are Patriot fans. But I am going to, I should say, tackle a quick baseball thought, a quick NFL thought, and a quick basketball thought at the end. But we're going to focus much of the show on reminiscing and looking back at the 2015 game on February 1st, which was Super Bowl 49 for the 2014 season between Seattle and New England. Okay, whenever I look at a game and I go back in time, I'm not as good as Julian Edelman. He does the games with names. He's got celebrities. They talk about the top movies and all this stuff. I'm going to skip that out. And the reason why I'm going to skip that part is because to me, this game was incredibly important to me um, as a person. I know that sounds trivial, but and I'm going to give you a little bit of a quick story. But I was 17 years old when this happened. I was in my senior year of high school. Uh, my senior year of high school was not an enjoyable experience socially. I'm kind of just going to leave it at that. Um, you know, I had friends. I'm not going to pretend that I, didn't have friends and nobody liked me, and that's not what I'm saying. It was just really hard for me socially because I grew up, no, in the same place my whole life, and college was coming up, and the decision about what you're going to do. Any 17-year-old, go ask them. It's not many of you remember, it's not necessarily an easy year of your life when you're 17, because you're dealing with independence, you're dealing with your desire to go do something different, but you're also dealing with things that are holding you back, and not necessarily all negative things. Just your hometown and your friends and your relationships and um, your hobbies and your sports and all these things. Like, it was not enjoyable socially at this particular time in my life. Like, there was a lot of stress about what I was gonna do, about my friends, my my future. It was just really difficult, and I was really thankful um, to have a small group of friends that helped me get through this time. Um, but it was a hard time. And the reason I talk about it in the context of this game is that Patriots Super Bowl run in January and February of 2015 was what the doctor ordered for me. I don't think I don't believe in coincidence with things like this. Like it was what I needed. And it sounds goofy, like, oh, you needed a Super Bowl win, the Patriots, you grew up with three of them, before you were 10 years old. Like, what do you mean you needed one when you were 17? Um, it just felt like I, I, for those of you who didn't know me, like, I lived and breathed sports. Like, I was obsessed with everything there was about sports. I would go home after every day at school and I would listen to Felger and Maz, right? Like that's why I do what I do now. Like I listen to sports podcasts. I followed, I watched documentaries about sports. I played sports. I wasn't any good at them, but I played them. And I was obsessed with these things. And the Patriots, I could recite Patriots history, and I still can, like it was, you know, written on the back of my hand. And so this time, I like my senior year, like I lived and breathed sports. And the day that the Patriots kicked off that season, was the day of my grandmother's celebration of life. And it was the first time I'd ever lost a loved one. And I remember that season, I remember like missing that Miami game because we were driving to her celebration of life and she had passed away the summer before. And the Patriots lose to the Dolphins to open up the game. And then later that season, um, I was on a college tour the day before um, the on to Cincinnati loss to the Chiefs, right? How weird does that seem that everyone thought the Chiefs ended the Patriots dynasty in 2014, yet here we are. The Chiefs have taken the Patriots dynasty 2.0 torch and walked with it to the Super Bowl this year and for the past like 4 out of 5 or whatever it is. So that was weird. But I was going on college tours. I was grieving the loss of family. I was dealing with a lot of social pressures of being in high school and being a senior in my future. Uh, and then I remember there was a game against the Bears that season where Gronk absolutely went off, and I was watching it at my sister's college because we had gone to visit her, but I had also gone to tour her college that day. And so it was like every single game that year, I can point to a moment in my life of being 17 and something with thing I was growing up with this Patriots team. And I know that sounds again really corny, really goofy, and I wasn't really sure how I was going to prepare this story, but you get to the playoffs, and if you were a New Englander and you have any good memory at all, you remember that in the winter of 2015, we got absolutely annihilated with snow. And so the first game of that playoffs was January 10th against the Baltimore Ravens. It must have been like 10 degrees. And I had gone with my best friend to we were baseball players to go hit in the morning at an indoor batting facility that morning, and it was freaking cold. And here we are getting ready for our baseball season. And it was like January 10th, and we're like, oh man. I remember driving with him and we were talking about the game. We're like, oh, the Ravens, they've come into Foxborough and they've whooped us before. And the Patriots that night had to overcome two separate 14-point deficits in order to win that game. And then you go forward the next weekend and they go and they blow out the Colts. They blow out the Colts 45-7. I remember it was the day before Martin Luther King Day. So no school. Stayed up late watching the Pats. Belichick lifts the trophy, says we're on to Seattle. And that's what we thought. We're like, we've got 2 weeks to like dive in to Seattle, to the Seahawks, the defending champs. They're trying to repeat, become the first team since us to repeat. Isn't it weird how the NFL works? 2003, the Patriots win the Super Bowl. They win it again in '04. 2013, the Seahawks win the Super Bowl. They're trying to go back to back. The Patriots stop them from doing that. And then 10 years later, the Chiefs win in 2023. Um, and then they're trying to win in 2024. So it's interesting how the NFL world just looks at us and laughs every year. But back to New England. Instead of talking about Seattle and the chance to stop their repeat and to win our fourth, we start talking about deflated footballs, and we do that for 2 weeks. All right, I'm not going to get into that. I could get into that and spend a whole episode on that. I want to spend this episode on the game because this Super Bowl, if New England lost it, that's what you're talking about. Okay? The stakes of this Super Bowl were enormous. Not just for me personally, because I was a huge sports fan and it gave me a distraction from all the stresses of life, but also because this game meant so much for Bill Belichick and Tom Brady's legacy. I don't think people quite understand, in retrospect, what would have happened if they had lost this game. Had New England, gone into this game with the Deflategate saga and controversy in the mirror, in the rearview mirror, but still coming up behind him in the left lane, uh, there might not have been any way to overcome that. And think about it this way too. Tom Brady wins 3 Super Bowls in his first 4 seasons as a starter, but then in 2007 they lose the undefeated season to the Giants. They do so again 3 years later, or 4 years later, against the Giants as well. They didn't weren't undefeated that year, but they lost a very winnable Super Bowl. So now Tom Brady's 3-2 in Super Bowls, and then in 2012 and 13 he loses AFC Championship games to Joe Flacco and Peyton Manning. So Brady and the Patriots have gone to the conference championship game now 4 consecutive years, and they have no Super Bowls to show for it. And then when they do advance to the Super Bowl, the big talking point is about the deflated footballs. So the stakes of this game were enormously high because if Brady loses to Seattle, he's 3-3 in Super Bowls, and he's lost 3 straight. And then the following year, Manning wins. So now Manning's got 2 and Brady's got 3. Completely changes the trajectory of the Brady Manning conversation forever. And who knows what happens with Jimmy Garoppolo if Jimmy Garoppolo has that much more leverage to eventually win the starting job. If Brady is, you know, suspended, what happens with Deflategate, what happens with Judge Berman and all these things. You could go into a complete what if the Patriots lose this game. Maybe that's a subject for another show. But the good news is the Patriots didn't win this game. Or, oh my goodness, didn't lose this game. They did not lose this game. I buried the lead there. Uh, and so what I want to do is I want to go through some of the stats of the game. Um, it's crazy when you think about it, how much went into this game. So 70,000 people attended it. It was at University of Phoenix Stadium in Glendale, Arizona, February 1st, 2015, as we've covered already. Um, Very interesting point about this game as well is the first quarter was scoreless. No score after the first quarter. The Vegas line on this was a pick, which means it was I remember this clearly. I think the Seahawks were like a half-point favorite, which at that point it's a pick 'em game. It's the Patriots weren't favored, but they weren't not favored either. I think technically, like numerically, the Seahawks were favored by half a point, and it might have been the only Super Bowl in Brady's career where he wasn't favored with the Patriots. That might be a stat we have to look up. I think Mahomes was favored in 2020 when he was with the Buccaneers. or with when Brady was with the Buccaneers. But but in this game, the Seahawks technically were favored, but it was a pick'em game. The over/under was 47, which they crushed. Um, the referee was Bill Vinovich. He's still kicking. Um, and the field judge was Bob Wagner. Mark Perlman was the line judge. Bill Schuster was the umpire. Those are all just weird factoids. Interesting thing about this game, time of possession. New England had time of possession 33 to 26. New England had fewer penalties, and they were better on third down. And they were sacked fewer times. Like, for as good as the Seattle defense was, like, they didn't overpower New England in this game. And if you look at this Patriots offense, you can make an argument that it was the healthiest offense that Tom Brady ever had in a Super Bowl, post 2010 or post 2011. Like, of the four Super Bowls he played, in the last decade, this was the one where they were the healthiest. Because against the Falcons, they didn't have Gronk. Against the Eagles, when they lost in 2018, in February 2018, they didn't have Edelman. And then against the Rams, Gronk, you could tell, wasn't really Gronk from an explosive standpoint. And Gronk had been, thinking about retiring. And he was talking about how after he did interviews where after that Rams Super Bowl, he was extremely exhausted. And then if you go into the Super Bowl with the Buccaneers, I suppose perhaps they were healthier. But from a Patriots standpoint, this is like the healthiest Pats team he had of those four final Super Bowls he had against Seattle, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and the Rams. Because if you look down, they had LeGarrette Blount and Shane Vereen as their running backs. They had Edelman, Gronk, Amendola, and LaFell. So that was, their three best receivers that year were Edelman, Amendola, and LaFell. And then they had Gronk, of course, as the catalyst. And remember, this is less than 2 years removed from the Aaron Hernandez tragedy and situation. So like the Aaron Hernandez leaving the team and going to jail and not being able to play, like Patriots had only functioned as with one offense, 1 year of offense without them so far, and they had lost Welker at the in that same offseason. So they had one full season, and that was the year they ended up throwing to guys like Austin Collie and, you know, Aaron Dobson in 2013. So this Patriots offense was built to play in a game like this, a tight game. They could eat clock. They weren't explosive. They must have ranked still in the top five in offense, but they weren't incredible and blowing people out that season. They had a couple big wins, like over the Chargers, the Broncos, the Bears, what have you. Um, but most of the season, they were playing in some, tough games, especially early on. On defense, the Patriots defense, see about some of these names. You had Darrelle Revis, Chandler Jones, Jamie Collins, Dante Hightower, Devin McCourty, Alan Branch, Brandon Browner, Vince Wilfork, Pat Chung, Logan Ryan, Rob Ninkovich, and Silver Saliga was a D tackle. And Alan, I think I mentioned Alan Branch already. You also had Kyle Arrington and Akeem Ayers, who played some hybrid roles. Kyle Arrington was supposed to be your nickel corner. We'll get to that later. And Akeem Ayers was sort of your outside linebacker guy who you'd bring in certain packages. Incredible defense for the Patriots. That might have been one of their most balanced defenses. And I think because Seattle's defense was an all-time great defense, the Pats D sometimes gets underrated in this game because I mean this Seattle defense is incredible as well. Um, Cliff Averill, Richard Sherman, Byron Maxwell, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, KJ Wright, Bruce Irvin, Jeremy Lane, who I believe left the game, and that was a or or I think was did Jeremy Lane have an interception and then he had to leave the game? I think that's what happened because I think they had to bring in Maxwell or some. I mean, I forget exactly, but there was an injury. But Jeremy Lane had picked Brady in this game. Good trivia question would be which Seattle defensive back intercepted Tom Brady in Super Bowl 49, and Bobby Wagner had one as a linebacker, but it wasn't Sherman, Thomas, or Chancellor. It was Jeremy Lane. So, I mean, that Seattle defense was really good. And then the Seattle offense wasn't prolific, but, and we're going to get to this, they were led by Marshawn Lynch. Right, Marshawn Lynch in this game, 24 attempts, 102 yards, one touchdown, including a 15-yard rush, and then he had one catch for 31 yards in this game. Marshawn Lynch was, for lack of a better term, a beast in this game, and he had a reputation for being a playoff performer. If you think about his run he had a couple of years earlier with the Seahawks against the Saints. So Russell Wilson had sort of pedestrian numbers in the Super Bowl, and by no means were they as prolific as they were perhaps a year before against Denver. But these rosters were stacked, and it was a great, uh, great table set for this game. Now, scoring wise, like I'll start with the first quarter. I said there was no score. Second quarter, Brandon LaFell caught a touchdown, and Tom Brady actually just spoke about this with Colin Cowherd the other day. He said that they installed packages like a goal line plays really close to the start of the game. Maybe a few days before, he approached Josh McDaniels and he said, we need to do an install. Like, we need more at the goal line. And one of these goal line plays was this touchdown he threw 11 yards out to Brandon LaFell. That gave the Patriots a 7-0 lead. Seattle tied it later on with a Marshawn Lynch touchdown. Then the Patriots had one of my favorite touchdowns between Brady and Gronk ever. If you watch the NFL Films recap of this game, it's Rob Gronkowski split out like a wide receiver, and I believe he's matched up against a linebacker. I forget which one, or maybe it's a safety. But for lack of a better term, it's a mismatch, and Tom absolutely puts it in the breadbasket for Gronk, and Gronk scores a touchdown that you think is going to give them a uh, a lead going into halftime. But halftime was not as enjoyable for those of us who were looking forward to watching Katy Perry and the sharks and everything that we were looking forward to. And the reason why is um, Chris Matthews, who I believe, not to be confused with the MSNBC anchor, Chris Matthews, who I believe was like their third or fourth string receiver, caught an 11-yard touchdown of his own with just 2 seconds left in the half to tie the game. And so now we go into halftime all tied up at 14, and it becomes a little precarious for the Patriots because you're like, oh, here we go, another close Super Bowl. Not that we thought it was going to be a cakewalk, but I remember sitting there on my couch being like, I can't enjoy Katy Perry right now. I'm deathly worried about this game. So we go into the second half, and Gostkowski opens the scoring in the third quarter with a field goal. You're like, all right, get a field goal. But then one of my least favorite plays of this whole game happens when Doug Baldwin catches a 3-yard touchdown from Russell Wilson. And if those of you who might remember the play, I'm gonna go find it here. Um, let's see here. The play was so aggravating because the Seahawks were just completing The drive was going nowhere. Russell Wilson had um, a 2nd and 1 that they converted for a first down, and then they went 1st and 10 at the at the at the 38, and there was a rush on Russell Wilson went for a 15-yard rush. I'm reading the play-by-play here. I know this isn't great content. And then I'm like, "Oh, you really needed to stop them there because now they're not just in field goal range. They're threatening to score a touchdown." And, they had them like in a precarious position where the Seahawks in no man's land. I'm wondering, like, Steven Hauschka was a good kicker. But I'm wondering, like, okay, even though we're indoors, you get him, maybe you make him have to always tie the game. I never wanted the Patriots to be trailing in this game. And then you had him in a position where they might have to settle for a field goal. They end up scoring a touchdown. And the reason why they score a touchdown is because they get down to the 3-yard line and, they don't run the ball. This will become a theme we talk about in a little bit. But Russell Wilson draws up this play where essentially the ref serves as a pick. Like, pick plays are often called offensive pass interference, but if you go watch the replay, Doug Baldwin ends up being wide open because the ref is practically in the way of any defender. And and they run a pick play with the ref, and it just pisses me off to this day. And I remember thinking, oh, damn, that's going to be a huge problem. Um, and Brady had thrown um had thrown a couple picks at this point, and so I'm like, okay, we're down by um yeah, hold on. I just want to make sure I got this right. What was it? I thought it was so Gostkowski didn't get the field goal. Okay, I was wrong. They were already down 3. That's what it was. I remember thinking, okay, if you hold them to a field goal, we're still in position to, come back with a touchdown. But then when Seattle gets a touchdown, now they're up 10. That's what it was. I remember thinking, oh, if we hold them to a field goal here, um, you know, we'll only be down 6. Instead, Wilson scrambles for a first down, then they get a big run from beast mode. Now they're at the goal line and they score this really cheap touchdown. Now they're up 10. And I remember thinking, okay, Brady's thrown a couple picks in this game. I'm not in love with this situation here, and I am worried that we're not going to be competitive in the fourth quarter. But boy, was I wrong because Tom Brady had the quarter of his life. Okay, he ends the third quarter on a 2nd and 7 where they get 6 yards on a James Devlin like flat route. Then they start the fourth quarter with a 3rd and 1, and Blunt gets stuffed. And I'm thinking, oh gosh. Now it's 4th and 2, and we're at our own 22. We went 3 and out to end the third and start the fourth, and we're down 10. And now we're giving the ball back to Seattle, who scored on, I believe, back-to-back possessions. Um, maybe they may have punted late in the fourth. I'm not going to go back and read it, but basically, like, the Seattle offense was cooking, right? New England had a 14-7 lead. Now all of a sudden it's 24-14. So that's 17 unanswered points. I digress. And so I remember thinking, okay, we really just need another stop. And lo and behold, Marshawn Lynch, they start handing off the ball to Marshawn Lynch, 2 yards, 1 yard, and then you get a sack by Ninkovich that creates a 4th and 15. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, we stopped Marshawn Lynch, and we're going to have to do that because Seattle's got a 10-point lead, and they're going to commit to running the ball, right? Like, we showed we could do it right there. But, it's still the fourth quarter and there's 12 minutes to go and we're down 10. So John Ryan punts it back. I'm thinking, okay, start fresh. We got 12 minutes and change. Let's go score. Start off the drive. Tom Brady sack from -8 yards. So now it's second and 18. And from here on out, Tom Brady has the best 10 minutes of his career. Maybe the only game that rivals this game was the overtime period against Kansas City in the 2018 AFC title game, because the rest of this quarter was vintage Tom Brady. I'll just read some of his completions. Brandon LaFell for 4 yards, Julian Edelman for 21 yards, Shane Vereen for 9, Julian Edelman for 21. And then they get down to the 4 yard line and they have this great touchdown throw to Amendola, where they get Edelman with a corner and then they find Amendola in the back of the end zone. This same play was run against the Jaguars in 2018 in that AFC title game. And they ran the same play in a little bit, which we'll get to, but it was so the Patriots are now within 3. Incredible. So now I'm thinking, okay, they're going to run the ball again because they're still up 3, but there's 8 minutes left. If they run the ball and go up a touchdown, they could bleed this down and force the Patriots to march down the field and score a touchdown against the best defense with the Super Bowl on the line. So I was still very weary of the Seattle offense and their willingness and ability to bleed clock. But Russell Wilson began this drive with an incomplete pass down the field intended for Lockett. And then they decide to run the ball, and they only get 5 yards. So now it's a 3rd and 5, and I'm like, okay. And then they try and throw it to beast mode, and they don't get it. So now it's 4th and 5, and they only took 1 minute off the clock. So now you give the ball back to Brady. The Seahawks have had 3 consecutive punts, and they haven't shown an ability to score again and extend the lead or bleed clock. And so Brady gets the ball back down 3. And for all intents and purposes, this might be the best drive of his career. I'm going to read this to you. Tom Brady passed short middle to Shane Vereen for 8 yards. Tom Brady passed complete short left to Shane Vereen for 5. Then back to Edelman for 9. Back to Vereen for 6. But then they had a pick play called on Danny Amendola. So now it's 2nd and 11. Doesn't matter. Brady complete to Gronk for 20 yards down the field. Then another completion to Gronk for 13 yards. Then Shane Vereen for 7. And then Brandon LaFell for 7. He completed passes to Vereen, LaFell, Amendola, and Edelman on these drives. They get down to 2:52 left in the game, and they call a timeout with 2nd and 3 at the Seattle 12. They rush it, get the first down. They get the first down with LeGarrette Blount, and then they get down to this goal line again, and they run that same play they ran with Amendola, except they throw it to Edelman, and Edelman's wide open. It's not a great ball from Brady if you watch the tape. It's a little wobbly, but it's right where it needs to be, and Edelman scores the go-ahead touchdown. It's now 28-24. So now the Patriots have a lead. And so Seattle cannot afford to run the ball anymore for the purposes of killing clock. They have to get down the field fast. And for some way, or for some reason and in some way, they're able to do this in like lightning speed. If you go listen to, it's either Wilson or Pete Carroll, talk about it after the game, or talk about it on the mic'd up or on the sideline or whatever, there's some sort of exchange between them where Pete Carroll tells Russell Wilson, like, you've got the 2-minute drill, you've got your timeouts, you need a touchdown to win the Super Bowl. And then you got to go 80 yards or whatever it is. Suddenly, though, And this is back when touchbacks only brought you to the 20. Uh, Russell Wilson, his first play from the New England 20, he completes a pass deep left to Marshawn Lynch for 31 yards. And Jamie Collins makes a great tackle. Otherwise, he might have gotten more yards there. And I remember thinking to myself, oh no, we're headed right there. We're headed back to it. Seattle is going to milk this down and they're going to win the Super Bowl Giants style. And this was before this next sequence because after that, he tried to do it again. He and incidentally enough, Malcolm Butler he made a great defended pass against Jermaine Kearse in the middle of the field. But a lot of people wondered there could have been a penalty there. And I remember thinking, okay, this Butler guy who's replaced Arrington as our nickel corner, because Arrington was getting torched early on in the game. And so Butler comes in, and Arrington had been a starter or at least a fringe, cornerback three with Logan Ryan for a couple years. And, you're wondering like, okay, Kyle Arrington's bench, who's this Malcolm Butler kid that we've seen a handful of times? So Malcolm Butler makes his presence known on that play, and you're like, okay, it's 3rd and 10. And then Russell Wilson throws a dart to Ricardo Lockett for a first down at midfield, and I'm thinking, shoot. So my roller coaster of emotions is crazy. The Patriots take the lead, but then the Seahawks have a big play to start their next drive. They need a touchdown to win, only to then get forced into a 3rd and 10. And then you give up that 3rd and 10 on the next play to pass to Lockett. And so as a Pats fan, I remember just thinking, okay, we really just need a stop. We need a turnover. We need one of those things. We need something to go our way. And so many things in the previous two Super Bowls against the Giants hadn't gone the Patriots' way. Asante Samuel dropping what would be a game-sealing interception, the David Tyree catch, the Mario Manningham catch, the Wes Welker drop, all these things in the Super Bowl, including in this same stadium, had not gone the Patriots' way before. And so the next play is an unbelievable pass. So it's 1st and 10 from the 38, and Russell Wilson just chucks it down the right sideline, 33 yards in the air. And it looks like Malcolm Butler is defending Kearse really well again, but the ball just pops up into the air and it's juggled a few times, and Kearse is laying on the ground and it falls right into his lap on the carom. And at that point, I remember thinking that it's the Tyree catch all over again. And if you ask every single Patriot fan, they'll tell you that. I'm not, embellishing the moment because I'm doing a 10-year anniversary pod. This is how it felt. So that happens, and it's like a funeral in my house. Like it feels like the Patriots season has gone up in smoke in that it's over. And I remember sitting there and I was watching it on that TV that's behind me, if you're watching on YouTube, because this is a TV I inherited from my family when I went to college, and it was our TV in Super Bowl 49. So if you think about the TVs that people watch the Super Bowl on in 2025, and we have this TV behind me, and this is what we are watching the Super Bowl on, it sort of makes you chuckle a little bit. So this happens, and I remember just being crestfallen because now Seattle's got the ball. They take a timeout. There's a minute left. It's 1st and 5. And now's the time when they're going to run the ball and win the game. And they run on their first play. Marshawn Lynch, one of the most underrated plays in Super Bowl history. Marshawn Lynch takes a left handoff for 4 yards, and he's tackled by the shoulder of Dante Hightower. Dante Hightower went on to have two of the biggest defensive plays in Patriot Super Bowl history, and they largely go untalked about. This one saved the season. If Dante Hightower doesn't tackle Marshawn Lynch basically with his shoulder, Marshawn Lynch walks into the end zone, and then it's up to the Patriots to go down and kick a field goal with under a minute to go and against this great defense. And it's very likely that they can't do that because they couldn't do it against the Giants or the Eagles a couple of years later. So, um, very, very underrated play. And then couple of years later, of course, he has the strip sack of Matt Ryan that starts the comeback. Um, very unheralded. So now it's 2nd and 1 from the one, and the clock is ticking. And this is talked about all the time. Pete Carroll didn't take a timeout. He was waiting for Belichick to take a timeout because he thought, oh, well, the Patriots are going to try and preserve as much time as possible to do what I just described, which is go down and kick a field goal. And I don't remember how many timeouts the Patriots had. I believe they had two left, and they 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 sort of kind of let the clock go down. And I remember thinking, well, they got to call a timeout because if Seattle scores with 50 seconds left and you still got a timeout, then you might be able to get into field goal range. Excuse me. But if you don't take a timeout and the clock drips down to 20 seconds and Seattle scores a touchdown with 20 seconds to go, now all of a sudden, you know, you're not going to score probably. Like it goes from being like very unlikely to extremely unlikely. Maybe a 20% chance of tying the game to like a 2% chance of tying the game. I'm not a mathematician, but it didn't look great. But the genius of Belichick is that he wanted Pete Carroll to make a decision. If you take a timeout there as the Patriots, Seattle gets a chance to talk over how, what they want to do at the 1 yard line with the Super Bowl on the line. But instead, they send out their goal line formation again, and the conventional wisdom is that they're going to run the ball. But Pete Carroll, not thinking it through, not having time, decides to play cute, and they send out this formation. And the genius of the Patriots, I'm not going to go through it. They had practiced this. Malcolm Butler knew what to do. That you can go watch the documentaries. Butler is sent onto the field. This guy has defended Curse well, but now with the Super Bowl on the line, 2nd and 1 at the goal line, um, they they have the audacity to throw the ball. But New England had a feeling they were going to run this play, and so they set up almost like a defensive pick so that Butler is able to jump the route. And Brandon Browner played a huge role in this. And Wilson extends his hands, looks to his right, and throws a slant route that is jumped on by Malcolm Butler, and Butler seals the interception and dives forward at the 1 yard line. It was unbelievable and one of the best plays in Super Bowl history. And if anything, it was devastating to Seahawks fans. I remember immediately going on Facebook and wanting to see what everyone was saying, right? Because back in the day, I mean, people used Twitter, but like teenagers didn't really use Twitter back then. And, Instagram wasn't what it is now. Like Facebook was where you went when you wanted to see what people were talking about in 2015. And, 10 years ago today, Malcolm Butler intercepted the ball in the end zone to win Brady's fourth Super Bowl for him. Famously, Tom Brady gifted Malcolm Butler the truck that is given to the Super Bowl MVP. A lot is made about who won Super Bowl MVP. The Patriots recover the ball. of course, and he's got his entourage of defenders around him. Everyone's crying. Brady's jumping up and down on the sideline next to Garoppolo and Josh McDaniels. And then, after there's some fights that break out after the final whistle, and there's the famous photo of Tom Brady not shaking Richard Sherman's hand. So there was a lot of cinema after the game was over. And there was a lot made about who should win it, the Super Bowl MVP. Now, look, Malcolm Butler had two incredible pass breakups and an interception. But I mean, I went through those final two Tom Brady drives were cinema. They were incredible. They were all worldly. It might have been the best quarter of football in NFL history. I believe he threw almost 150 yards in that quarter on basically on two possessions. Um, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Well, I do, but not mind to be where I want them to be. Um, but like Malcolm Butler would have been deserving because that was the most valuable play of the game. Uh, but Tom Brady, the way he played, I mean, that was an incredible Super Bowl. And what that Super Bowl did is it gave Brady four. And the reason why it's so important to talk about, I think, in context 10 years later, is everyone's always waiting to crown the next GOAT. And I have the utmost respect for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't want to make this episode about them. They're going to have their 10-year anniversary pods with random kids in Overland Park and Kansas City and, Springfield, Missouri, and wherever, um, who are in high school now. But I think this dynasty 2.0 for the Patriots was symbolic of establishing Brady's current legacy as the greatest quarterback of all time. And for the reasons I've outlined, you win four, now you're tied with Montana, you've been to six. And then, the following year they come up just short in Denver, but then they go and they win this incredible comeback against the Falcons, and who knows, 2 years from now we'll be talking about that 10-year reunion. Um, but it was it was these years when Brady established his legacy as the greatest quarterback in NFL history. Um, his win with the Buccaneers and his final win with the Patriots, those were gravy to me. He was the GOAT. I was always defending him as the GOAT. I mean, this is the hard thing about growing up a Patriots fan is we were constantly on defense. Not to mention Deflategate and Spygate, but like we were constantly saying like, oh, well, Brady's the GOAT, and people would say, oh, well, he has to match Montana. And then once he won this Super Bowl that I've been talking about, it was, well, he's got to win more than Montana, or he's got to pass Jordan. It's like Jordan doesn't even play football. So all these things started coming home to roost in these years. It was very, you know, it was very sentimental for me. I remember just staying up with my mom and watching the NFL Network highlights of them interviewing everyone. And you've got Brady's young kids, and he was still married to Giselle, and you've got Brady and Belichick hugging, and Gronk there, and LeGarrette Blount, and all these different things, all these different aspects of this team. And I think it was Dan Patrick was there to interview Brady after the game, and he's one of my role models in this industry. And it was just a great Super Bowl. And we had a snow day the next day, right? And um, or I think we got sent home early from school the next day or something like that. It might not have been a full snow day. I cannot remember, but it was awesome. February 1st, 2015. Uh, Tremendous. Some of the highlights of my life. And, starting in that month of February of 2015, I really started to turn the page and, come to grips with what, my future looked like as a young man and as a soon to be high school graduate and college student, soon to be adult. I sort of turned the corner. By March, I decided where I was going to go to college, and I had a really good group of friends. And the last memory I'll share is that, that day or the day after. I picked up, my mom brought me to Olympia Sports, which, if you're a New Englander, you know Olympia Sports is no longer. And we bought this shirt that if you're watching on it on YouTube, you can see my mom bought it for me. Usually when you're 17 years old, your parents might buy you, Christmas gifts and birthday presents and, food and shelter and give you a place to live. But usually when it comes to novelty purchases, by the time you're 17, it's kind of up to you. But mom bought this for me, and it was it's one of my favorite shirts. Super Bowl XLIX champions, and then underneath it says "We are all Patriots," which is of course what Robert Kraft said after every Super Bowl win. Um, Incredible moment, and happy to have been a part of it. And I hope all of you Patriots fans are celebrating today. All right, three quick things before we wrap up. Major subject change, but I'm glad you stuck with me through the whole time. Uh, First thing, MLB needs to fix their free agency. This is ridiculous. I mean, we're 15 days away or less from spring training, and there's absolutely no future on the horizon of for Alex Bregman and Pete Alonso. Max Scherzer just got signed yesterday. This free agency is a joke, and I'm starting to get sick of it. All right, so that's my first rant about baseball. Um, I can't uh, I can't begin to describe the feeling of free agency when your team is signing people and it happens quickly. Like in the NFL and NHL specifically, like when free agency opens, people start signing contracts like within hours. And by the end of the day, you have a pretty good idea of what your team looks like. I still have major question marks about this Red Sox lineup, and we're 15 days away from spring training. Um, so as a Red Sox fan, it's frustrating considering we've been in on Alex Bregman, kind of like we're in on everybody. And I just wish they would find a way to, excuse me, speed this up a little bit. Secondly, uh, news broke yesterday that Terry Rozier, former Celtic point guard, is being investigated for some gambling infractions. Um, that he might have altered his performance. And I've been saying this for a long time. This is a natural byproduct when sport entities marry themselves to gambling companies. I'm not saying it's directly related to this case, but as we talked about with Shohei Ohtani and Calvin Ridley, or maybe was Calvin Ridley gambling or was that marijuana? I honestly don't remember, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But I digress. Football players have been reprimanded for it before. Baseball players still remains to be seen what happened with Shohei Ohtani and now Terry Rozier in the NBA. It's natural outcome when sports gambling becomes so permeated. What do you think's going to happen? Did you think it wasn't going to happen? I'm old enough to remember the Tim Donahue days, you know, where the referee was involved. I guarantee you within the next 5 years, there'll be a referee in college sports or pro sports where this happens and they get investigated. Whether or not they're proven guilty, um, is up for debate. But this is a natural outgrowth. Okay, so I'm concerned about that as a sports fan, even though I'm not a huge NBA guy. Personally, I think they should investigate Terry Rozier for his absolute no-show in Game 7 against the Cavaliers in 2018, but that's a topic for another show. All right, last thing. Drake May's in the Pro Bowl this weekend. Okay, I know we don't care about the Pro Bowl, and it's kind of a joke now, and it's flag football, um, and he's only there because nobody wanted to go. But I think, unlike Mac Jones, this Drake May in the Pro Bowl situation is a little more fruitful because I think if Drake May can go to the Pro Bowl and just be around guys from other teams, make relationships, I don't think Mac Jones was anyone's destination. Okay, I don't think I liked Mac Jones. I was a laggard on giving up on Mac Jones. I think we all remember. But like nobody was gonna come to New England and play for Mac Jones and Bill Belichick. People might come to New England to play for Mike Vrabel and Drake May as a combo. Nobody was beating down the door to take less money and come play with Mac Jones. People might be beating down the door to come play for Mike Vrabel and alongside Drake May, especially if they're an offensive player. So if Drake May can go to the Pro Bowl, make some relationships with other, you know, players, possibly future free agents, possibly coaches that might end up, coming into effect here. Like I think Drake May is the real deal. He's way more athletically gifted than Mac Jones was. And so, am I going to watch the Pro Bowl? Probably not. Do I think the Pro Bowl for Drake May might be a more fruitful experience than it was for Mac Jones? Yeah, I do, and it's for those reasons I outlined. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Home Field Advantage. I appreciate you tuning into the program. Of course, most of it was taken up by the 10-year anniversary of Super Bowl XLIX, also known as Super Bowl 49, a great moment in New England Patriot history. So I appreciate you all tuning into that, making it to the end. We value you. We appreciate you. And I certainly am grateful for you listening to my personal monologues. So all of that is much appreciated. So next week we'll do our Super Bowl preview. I'll come back next week. We'll break down Chiefs Eagles from a macro perspective. We'll also get ready for the Four Nations face-off, which will be happening very shortly in the NHL. I think that'll be a lot of fun. We'll talk about the Celtics as well on our next program. But all of that ahead, you can follow us online and on socials at Homefield Pod on both Instagram and Twitter. You can also like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. But until then, my name is Will Highland. Hope you have a great weekend. This has been Home Field Advantage.